Human, can you handle both of us at once? The seductive purr of the Kobali females, Zara and Lyra, sent a shiver down Mark Kennedy's spine. He'd barely set foot on their homeworld, and already the diplomatic mission was careening into uncharted territory. Mark swallowed hard, his mind racing. As Earth's top negotiator, he'd prepared for complex trade talks, not propositions from aroused alien beauties. The stakes were astronomical. Earth's future in the galactic community hung in the balance. The Kobali welcoming ceremony had started innocently enough. Quasar, the lead negotiator, greeted Mark with traditional hospitality, but as the event progressed, the air crackled with an unexpected intensity. Every Kobali eye seemed fixed on the lone human, their interest palpable. Questions flew at Mark from all directions. How does human reproduction work? Is it true you only have two sexes? The Kobali's fascination was relentless, bordering on obsession. As the ceremony wound down, Mark learned the truth. The Kobali's unique biology required multiple partners for reproduction. To them, he wasn't just a diplomat, he was a potential mate, an exotic specimen to be studied and experienced. Zara and Lyra cornered him, their intentions clear. Their svelte forms and captivating eyes made Earthwomen pale in comparison. Mark's breath caught in his throat as they propositioned him, their voices a mix of curiosity and desire. But before he could respond, alarms blared. The Vorax, a hostile alien race, had arrived unannounced. Their massive ships darkened the Kobali sky, a clear threat to the delicate negotiations. Quasar pulled Mark aside, her face grave. The Vorax seek to destroy our alliance, she explained. They fear the combined strength of humans and Kobali. Mark's communicator chirped, an urgent message from Earth Command. The situation was direr than he'd realized. These negotiations weren't just about trade, they were Earth's lifeline. Without the resources the Kobali offered, humanity's expansion into the stars would grind to a halt. Now, Mark faced an impossible task. He had to secure a trade deal, fend off the aggressive advances of the Kobali females, and outmaneuver the Vorax, all while upholding his diplomatic duties and ensuring humanity's cosmic future. As Zara and Lyra pressed closer, their alien perfume clouding his senses, Mark steeled himself. He was humanity's representative, Earth's best hope. Whatever it took, he would see this mission through. The fate of two worlds now rested on his shoulders. Could one human handle it all? Mark Kennedy was about to find out. Mark's mind raced as he contemplated his response to Zara and Lyra's proposition. Before he could formulate a reply, the air was rent by a piercing alarm. The Kobali around him froze, their faces a mix of confusion and fear. Quasar rushed to Mark's side, her earlier playfulness replaced by unbreakable spirit. "The Vorax!" she hissed, pointing to the sky. Mark followed her gesture and felt his stomach drop. Massive ships, their hulls gleaming with a metallic sheen unlike anything he'd seen before, blotted out the stars. "They seek to destroy our alliance," Quasar explained, her voice tight. "They fear the combined strength of humans and Kobali." As if on cue, Mark's communicator chirped. He fumbled with the device, keenly aware of the Kobali eyes fixed upon him. The message from Earth Command was brief but alarming. Without the resources the Kobali offered, humanity's expansion into the stars would grind to a halt. The stakes had just risen exponentially. Mark took a deep breath, centering himself. He was humanity's representative, Earth's best hope. Whatever it took, he would see this mission through. "Quasar," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We need to grant the Vorax an audience, immediately." The Kobali leader's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you certain? They are hostile." "Precisely why we need to talk to them," Mark interrupted. "Denying them will only escalate the situation. Trust me on this." Quasar hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Very well, human Mark. I will make the arrangements." As Quasar moved away to contact the Vorax, Mark found himself once again cornered by Zara and Lyra. Their earlier seductive demeanor had shifted to one of concern and curiosity. "What will you do, human Mark?" Zara asked, her luminescent eyes searching his face. "Save us all if I can," Mark replied, managing a small smile. "But first, I need to understand what's really going on here." The meeting with the Vorax was tense from the start. Their leader, Commander Grax, towered over the assembled delegates, his scaled skin shimmering under the harsh lights of the conference room. Mark studied the alien carefully, noting the way Grax's tail twitched and his clawed hands clenched and unclenched. As Grax began to list his demands, Mark's trained eye caught subtle inconsistencies. The Vorax commander's body language didn't match his forceful words. There was a hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty that most would miss. Mark's mind raced, piecing together a daring plan. He cleared his throat, drawing all eyes to him. "If I may interject," he began, his voice calm and measured, "I believe there's a solution that could benefit all parties involved." Grax's reptilian eyes narrowed. "Speak, human." Mark outlined his proposal for a three-way trade agreement. As he spoke, he watched the reactions of both Kobali and Vorax. The tension in the room gradually eased, replaced by cautious interest. "This could work," Quasar said slowly, her gaze moving between Mark and Grax. The Vorax commander was silent for a long moment, his tail swishing thoughtfully. "We will consider your proposal, human," he finally rumbled. As the meeting adjourned, Mark felt a small surge of triumph. He'd bought them time at least, but his relief was short-lived as he noticed the growing tension between Zara and Lyra. The two Kobali females had positioned themselves on either side of him, their rivalry palpable. Quasar approached, her expression troubled. "Human Mark," she said quietly, pulling him aside, "I must speak with you about Zara and Lyra's behavior. It is most unusual for our species. Such competition could jeopardize our negotiations." Mark nodded, his mind already formulating a solution. "What if we were to implement a cultural exchange program?" he suggested. "Representatives from each species could spend time on the other's homeworlds. It would foster understanding and cooperation." Quasar's eyes lit up. "An excellent idea. I will present it to the Council immediately." As preparations for the exchange program began, Mark received an urgent transmission from Earth Command. The news they delivered sent a chill down his spine. A powerful alien artifact, hidden somewhere on the Kobali homeworld, threatened the stability of the entire sector. Mark's mission had just become far more complex. Amidst this whirlwind of diplomatic and clandestine activity, a new player entered the scene. Dr. Alara Stone, a human xenobiologist, arrived to assist with the cultural exchange program. Her presence added yet another layer to the already complicated dynamics. Mark watched as Zara and Lyra eyed the human woman warily, clearly viewing her as new competition. Dr. Stone, oblivious to the romantic undercurrents, threw herself into her work with enthusiasm. As night fell, Mark found himself unable to sleep. He stepped out onto a balcony, gazing at the alien cityscape below. The cool night air did little to calm his racing thoughts. A sound behind him made him turn. Dr. Stone stood in the doorway, her expression curious. "Trouble sleeping, Mr. Kennedy?" she asked, joining him at the railing. Mark nodded, weighing his options. After a moment's hesitation, he made a decision. "Dr. Stone," he said quietly, "I need your help. What I'm about to tell you must remain absolutely confidential." As he outlined the situation, the hidden artifact, the true nature of the Vorax threat, Dr. Stone's eyes widened. "This is incredible," she breathed, "and terrifying. What can I do?" "Your expertise in xenobiology might be crucial in understanding the artifact," Mark explained, "and we may need to develop defenses against this invasion force." Dr. Stone nodded, her face set with willpower. "I'm in. Where do we start?" As they began to plan their next moves, neither noticed the shadowy figure listening from the darkness beyond the balcony. The game had changed, and the true battle was about to begin. As the first rays of Kobali's twin suns pierced the horizon, Mark Kennedy's eyes snapped open. He'd barely slept, his mind churning with the weight of his mission and the revelations of the previous night. Quietly, so as not to disturb the still sleeping Dr. Stone in the adjacent room, he dressed and made his way to the balcony. The alien cityscape stretched before him, a sprawling metropolis of crystalline spires and organic architecture. In the distance, the ominous silhouettes of Vorax ships loomed against the pale sky. Mark's face hardened as he contemplated the threat they posed. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Stone emerged, her hair disheveled, but her eyes alert. "I hope you have a plan, Mr. Kennedy," she said, joining him at the railing. Mark nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We need to move quickly. I've arranged a series of cultural exchange meetings as cover for our investigation. We'll use them to gather intelligence on the Vorax and search for the artifact." Dr. Stone raised an eyebrow. "And how do you propose we do that without arousing suspicion?" A wry smile tugged at Mark's lips. "By doing exactly what they expect us to do, being curious diplomats." The first meeting commenced in a vast chamber adorned with intricate Kobali tapestries. Mark sat at the head of a long table, flanked by Quasar and Grax. As discussions of trade agreements and cultural practices unfolded, Mark's trained eye caught every twitch, every micro-expression on the Vorax delegates' faces. Dr. Stone, under the guise of a routine medical examination, discreetly scanned the Vorax physiology. Her eyes widened as the data streamed across her tablet. "Mark," she whispered during a brief recess, "their genetic structure, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. The level of modification it shouldn't be possible with their claimed level of technology." Mark filed this information away, his suspicions about the Vorax growing. As the talks resumed, he steered the conversation towards topics he knew would provoke reactions: galactic exploration, weapons technology, and ancient civilizations. Each response was a piece of the puzzle he was assembling. Days blurred together in a whirlwind of meetings, covert scans, and late-night strategy sessions. Mark's sleep was interrupted not just by the weight of his mission, but by the increasingly aggressive advances of Zara and Lyra. The tension between the two Kobali females came to a head during a formal diplomatic dinner. As Mark sampled an array of exotic Kobali delicacies, Zara leaned in close, her breath hot against his ear. "Human Mark," she purred, "I must show you the gardens tonight. There are experiences unique to our world that you simply must try." Before Mark could respond, Lyra appeared at his other side, her eyes flashing. "Surely human Mark would prefer to visit the ancient temples. I could give him a very personal tour." The air crackled with tension as the two Kobali faced off across the table. Glasses clinked ominously as their voices rose, drawing the attention of the entire gathering. Mark's mind raced, acutely aware of the diplomatic disaster unfolding before him. With a smooth motion, he rose to his feet, raising his glass high. "My dear friends," he proclaimed, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, "your world is truly a marvel, filled with wonders I've yet to fully appreciate. Perhaps we could arrange a group excursion. I'm sure all of us could benefit from experiencing the full breadth of Kobali culture." The tension dissipated as quickly as it had arisen, replaced by murmurs of agreement. Mark caught Quasar's eye across the table, noting the mix of relief and concern in her expression. Later that night, as Mark pored over his notes in the privacy of his quarters, a soft knock at the door announced Quasar's arrival. Her usual composure was replaced by a nervous energy that set Mark on edge. "Human Mark," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "there is something you must know. The artifact you seek, we have been guarding it for centuries." Mark's breath caught in his throat. "You knew?" Quasar nodded solemnly. "It is a weapon of unimaginable power. In the wrong hands, it could bring destruction to the entire sector. The Vorax, their interest in our world is not just about resources or alliances. They seek the artifact." This revelation shifted the entire paradigm of Mark's mission. He thanked Quasar for her honesty and immediately contacted Dr. Stone. Together, they formulated a new plan to locate the artifact before the Vorax could get their hands on it. Under the cover of the Cultural Exchange Program, Mark and Dr. Stone began a methodical search of the Kobali capital. They explored ancient libraries, visited historical sites, and interviewed Kobali scholars, always alert for any clue that might lead them to the artifact's location. Their breakthrough came during a visit to an old Kobali temple on the outskirts of the city. As Mark ran his hand along an intricately carved wall, he felt a slight give beneath his fingers. With a soft click, a hidden door swung open, revealing a passage that plunged deep into the earth. Mark and Dr. Stone exchanged a look of excitement tinged with apprehension. As they descended into the darkness, the weight of their mission pressed down on them like the tons of rock overhead. Whatever lay at the end of this passage had the power to reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The underground facility was a maze of ancient technology and cryptic puzzles. Mark's diplomatic skills were put to the test as he deciphered Kobali riddles and negotiated with long-dormant security systems. Dr. Stone's expertise in xenobiology proved invaluable as they encountered biological barriers designed to test the worthiness of those who sought the artifact. As they progressed deeper into the facility, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His suspicions were confirmed when he caught a glimpse of a Vorax shadow darting behind a column. Grax had ordered his people to tail them, making their covert operation infinitely more complicated. The pressure mounted as another urgent message arrived from Earth Command. Vorax fleet movements had increased dramatically in nearby sectors. Time was running out. In a bold move to buy more time, Mark proposed a series of diplomatic war games between the humans, Kobali and Vorax. As he outlined the benefits of such exercises in fostering trust and understanding, he could see the wheels turning in Grax's mind. The Vorax commander agreed, his scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. "Very well, human. We shall play your games. But remember, in war, even simulated war, there are always consequences." As the war games commenced, Mark found himself stretched to his limits. By day, he participated in complex strategic simulations, matching wits with the Vorax and Kobali military minds. By night, he and Dr. Stone continued their relentless search for the artifact. It was during one of these simulations that Mark noticed something odd about the Vorax tactics. Their maneuvers mirrored an ancient Earth strategy, one that had been obsolete for centuries. The implication was staggering. Had the Vorax had contact with humans before? He shared his suspicions with Dr. Stone, who immediately began analyzing Vorax language patterns for any connection to Earth languages. As they delved deeper into this mystery, the search for the artifact took on new urgency. Their progress, however, was interrupted by an unexpected visit from Zara and Lyra. The two Kobali females, their rivalry temporarily set aside, approached Mark with a proposition that left him speechless. "Human Mark," Zara began, her luminescent eyes fixed on his face. "We offer our knowledge of Kobali history and architecture. With our help, you could find what you seek in half the time." Lyra stepped forward, her voice low and intense. "In exchange, we ask only that you participate in a Kobali bonding ritual. It would be mutually beneficial." Mark's mind raced, weighing the potential benefits against the diplomatic risks. Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the complex. A Vorax stealth team had been detected attempting to breach the underground facility. In an instant, the room erupted into action. Mark, Dr. Stone, Zara, and Lyra rushed towards the hidden entrance, knowing that the fate of the artifact, and potentially the entire sector, hung in the balance. As they raced through the winding corridors, the sound of Vorax weaponry echoed behind them. Mark's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of the monumental task before him. The true test of humanity's strength and ingenuity was about to begin, with the future of multiple species resting on his shoulders. They rounded a corner and came face to face with the Vorax incursion team. Time seemed to slow as Mark assessed the situation, his diplomatic training warring with the urgent need for action. In that frozen moment, he knew that his next move would shape the course of interstellar relations for generations to come. "Come." In that instant, Mark made his choice. "Everyone, stay behind me!" he shouted, stepping forward to face the Vorax incursion team. The corridor erupted in chaos as energy weapons discharged, filling the air with the acrid smell of ozone. Mark dove for cover behind a jutting piece of ancient architecture, his mind racing to formulate a plan. "Dr. Stone, can you access the facility's security systems from here?" he called out over the din of battle. The xenobiologist furiously tapped at her tablet. "I'm trying, but the Vorax have some kind of jamming technology in place." Mark gritted his teeth, assessing their options. The Vorax were advancing, their scaled forms barely visible through the smoke and debris. He caught sight of Zara and Lyra, their luminescent eyes wide with a mix of fear and willpower. "Zara, Lyra, I need you to guide us to the artifact chamber," Mark said, his voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. We can't let the Vorax get their hands on it. The two Kobali females nodded in unison, their earlier rivalry forgotten in the face of this crisis. As they began to move deeper into the facility, Mark tapped his communicator, opening a channel to the Kobali security forces above. "This is Human Mark Kennedy," he said, ducking as another volley of energy blasts scorched the wall above him. "We have a Vorax incursion team in the underground facility. Request immediate backup and activation of all available security protocols." The response came back garbled, but Mark caught enough to understand that his request had been acknowledged. He turned to Dr. Stone, who was still working feverishly on her tablet. "Any luck with those systems?" She shook her head, frustration evident on her face. "The Vorax technology is incredibly advanced. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." Mark's mind flashed back to the oddities he'd noticed during the war games. The familiarity of the Vorax tactics, the inexplicable technological leaps. There was a missing piece to this puzzle, and he was determined to find it. "Keep trying," he urged Dr. Stone. "We need every advantage we can get." As they pressed deeper into the facility, the sounds of battle grew more distant. The ancient corridors twisted and turned, forming a labyrinth that would have been impossible to navigate without Zara and Lyra's guidance. "The artifact chamber is just ahead," Zara whispered, her voice tight with tension. They rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with a massive door covered in intricate Kobali glyphs. Lyra stepped forward, her fingers dancing across the symbols in a complex pattern. With a low groan, the door began to slide open. The chamber beyond was a marvel of alien engineering. Crystalline structures pulsed with an otherworldly light, casting shimmering reflections across the polished floor. In the center of the room, atop a raised dais, sat a small object that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality around it. "The artifact," Dr. Stone breathed, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. Mark took a step toward the dais, but before he could reach it, a violent tremor shook the facility. The lights flickered, and an ominous rumble echoed through the chamber. "What was that?" Lyra asked, her usual composure cracking. As if in answer, Mark's communicator crackled to life. The voice of the Kobali security chief came through, distorted but urgent. "Human Mark, the Vorax have initiated some kind of sabotage device. Our power systems are failing, and the facility's defenses are going haywire. You need to secure the artifact and evacuate immediately." Mark's mind raced, calculating their options. He turned to his team, his expression grim but determined. "Dr. Stone, I need you to work with the Kobali technicians to restore power. Your expertise might be the key to countering whatever the Vorax have done." The xenobiologist nodded, her face set with grit. "I'm on it." "Zara, Lyra, you're with me," Mark continued. "We need to secure the artifact and find a way out of here before this whole place comes down around us." As Dr. Stone hurried back towards the facility's main systems, Mark approached the artifact. Its pulsing energy seemed to intensify as he drew near, as if reacting to his presence. "Be careful, Human Mark," Zara warned. "The artifacts of our ancestors are not to be trifled with." Mark reached out, his fingers mere inches from the strange object, when another violent tremor shook the chamber. The artifact tumbled from its pedestal, rolling across the floor. As it fell, it began to emit pulses of energy that sent shockwaves through the room. "Look out!" Lyra cried, pulling Mark back as a section of the ceiling collapsed where he had been standing moments before. The chamber began to shift and reconfigure around them, walls sliding and floors tilting at impossible angles. Mark realized with growing horror that they were now trapped in a maze of the artifact's creation, cut off from the exit and any hope of easy escape. As they struggled to maintain their footing in the ever-changing labyrinth, Mark's communicator crackled once more. This time, it was Dr. Stone's voice that came through, tight with tension. "Mark, we've got another problem. A Vorax fleet has just entered the Kobali system. They're outgunning the Kobali defenses, and Earth reinforcements are hours away." Mark's heart sank as the full weight of the situation settled on his shoulders. They were trapped in a collapsing facility, hunted by Vorax soldiers, with a potentially world-ending artifact activated and an invasion force bearing down on them from above. As he looked at the frightened faces of Zara and Lyra, and felt the weight of Dr. Stone's and Earth Command's expectations, Mark knew that the next few hours would test him like nothing ever had before. The fate of not just his mission, but potentially the entire sector, rested on his ability to find a way out of this seemingly impossible situation. With a deep breath, Mark steadied himself and began to formulate a plan. Time was running out, and failure was not an option. As the walls continued to shift around them and the distant sounds of battle echoed through the facility, he prepared to face the greatest challenge of his career, and perhaps the greatest threat humanity had ever encountered. The shifting walls of the artifact chamber threatened to crush them at any moment, but Mark's mind was already racing ahead, formulating a plan. "Dr. Stone," he barked into his communicator, "get to the Kobal Command Center immediately. We need you to coordinate the planet's defenses and establish contact with our reinforcements." "Understood," came the quick reply. "What about you?" "I'm going after the artifact. We can't let it fall into Vorak's hands." As Dr. Stone's footsteps faded away, Mark turned to Zara and Lyra. "We need to move, now." The trio plunged deeper into the labyrinth, ducking under falling debris and leaping over suddenly appearing chasms. Mark's years of training kicked in as he analyzed each new obstacle, finding creative solutions that left the Kobali women impressed. They rounded a corner to find 3 Vorak soldiers attempting to breach a security door. Without hesitation, Mark sprang into action. He dropped low, sweeping the legs out from under the nearest Voraks before rolling to avoid a blast of energy from another's weapon. Zara and Lyra joined the fray, their luminescent eyes flashing with perseverance. Mark watched in amazement as they moved in perfect synchronization, their fighting styles complementing each other flawlessly. Using a fallen piece of debris as cover, Mark assessed the situation. The Voraks' superior strength and reflexes gave them an advantage, but their movements were predictable, almost robotic. He spotted a pattern in their attacks and seized the opportunity. "Zara, left flank!" he shouted. "Lyra, draw their fire!" The Kobali women responded instantly, trusting Mark's judgment. As Lyra distracted the Voraks with a series of quick jabs, Zara circled around. Mark timed his move perfectly, tackling the lead Voraks just as Zara struck from behind. In a matter of moments, the 3 Voraks lay unconscious at their feet. Mark caught Zara and Lyra looking at him with a mixture of admiration and something else, something that made his heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the battle. "The artifact," Lyra said, breaking the moment. "It's just ahead." They entered the central chamber to find the artifact pulsing with dangerous levels of energy. The very air crackled with power, and Mark could feel his hair standing on end. "We need to stabilize it," he said, mind working furiously. "Zara, Lyra, I need your knowledge of Kobali technology. If we combine it with some human engineering principles, we might be able to create a containment field." The next few minutes were a blur of activity as they worked together, Mark's intuition guiding the application of the Kobali's ancient knowledge. They used pieces of fallen technology, rewiring and reconfiguring them into a makeshift containment unit. As they worked, Mark became acutely aware of Zara and Lyra's proximity. Their hands brushed as they passed components back and forth, and more than once he caught them looking at him with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. Finally, with a low hum, the containment field sprang to life around the artifact. Its wild pulsing slowly stabilized, the dangerous energy levels dropping to manageable levels. "We did it," Zara breathed, her voice filled with awe. "No time to celebrate," Mark said, already moving towards the exit. "We need to get topside and assess the situation." They emerged from the underground facility to find chaos reigning in the Kobali capital. Vorak ships filled the sky, exchanging fire with Kobali defense platforms. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning materials. Mark's communicator crackled to life. "Kennedy, this is Dr. Stone. I'm at the command center. What's your status?" "We've secured the artifact," Mark replied, his eyes scanning the battlefield above. "What's the situation up there?" "Not good. The Vorax fleet outguns us significantly. Earth reinforcements are still hours away." Mark's mind raced, piecing together a strategy. "Use the artifact's energy signature," he ordered. "We can modify it to disrupt the Vorax fleet's communications and navigation systems." "Brilliant," Dr. Stone replied. I'll get on it right away. As Stone worked on implementing his plan, Mark turned to Zara and Lyra. I need you two to help me coordinate the planet's defenses. We're going to show these Vorax what happens when they underestimate humanity and its allies. Mark took command of a nearby defense station, his fingers flying over the alien controls as if he'd been born to them. He implemented tactics inspired by ancient Earth battles, feints, flanking maneuvers, and concentrated strikes that the Vorax, for all their advanced technology, seemed unprepared for. Zara and Lyra worked beside him, their earlier rivalry forgotten in the heat of battle. They called out incoming threats and relayed Mark's orders to the Kobal forces with perfect precision. Just as the tide of battle seemed to be turning in their favor, Mark's communicator buzzed again. Kennedy, this is Admiral Chen. We've just entered the system. Admiral, Mark replied, relief evident in his voice. Your timing is impeccable. We've got a situation here that you seem to have well in hand, Chen interrupted, her tone a mixture of approval and skepticism. Your unconventional tactics have certainly gotten results. But this isn't over yet, Kennedy. We've got a lot of cleaning up to do. As if to underscore the Admiral's words, a new transmission came through from the captured Vorax soldiers. Their leader, voice strained but determined, spoke directly to Mark. Human Mark Kennedy, the Vorax said, we've been monitoring your actions. There are those among us who wish to speak with you. We remember our human heritage, and we seek both alternatives to this conflict. Mark's eyes widened as he processed this new information. He looked at Zara and Lyra, saw the hope and fear mingling in their luminescent gazes, and knew that the real challenge was just beginning. With Earth reinforcements arriving, a divided Vorax fleet, and the powerful artifact in play, the next few hours would shape the future of multiple species. And through it all, Mark couldn't ignore the growing tension between himself and the two Kobal women at his side. As he prepared to navigate the complex diplomatic waters ahead, he realized that his personal entanglements might prove just as challenging as the interstellar crisis at hand. Taking a deep breath, Mark opened a channel to Admiral Chen. Admiral, he said, his voice steady and determined, I think it's time we talked about negotiation strategies. The next move we make could change the face of the galaxy forever. Mark's fingers flew across the holographic interface, adjusting Kobal defense grids and coordinating with Earth reinforcements. The skies above the Kobal capital gradually cleared as the combined forces pushed back the remaining Vorax ships. Admiral Chen's face appeared on a nearby screen, her expression a mix of approval and caution. Kennedy, report to the Central Plaza immediately. We need to capitalize on this moment. Mark nodded, turning to Zara and Lyra. You heard the Admiral. Let's move. As they made their way through the debris-strewn streets, Mark's mind raced with the implications of the Vorax transmission. The possibility of peace, however slim, ignited a spark of hope within him. The Central Plaza bustled with activity. Earth Marines secured the perimeter, while Kobal medics tended to the wounded. Admiral Chen stood at the center, flanked by Kobal officials and a group of Vorax who had laid down their arms. Kennedy, Chen called out as they approached, your unorthodox tactics may have just changed the course of this conflict. The artifact's energy signature disrupted not only their systems, but their genetic stability as well. Some of the Vorax are showing signs of reverting to their original human form. Mark's eyes widened. That's incredible, but how? We don't have time for a full debrief, Chen interrupted. I need you to take point on negotiations. Your unique position as a bridge between all parties makes you the ideal candidate. Mark glanced at Zara and Lyra, noting the mix of pride and concern in their luminescent eyes. Understood, Admiral. Where do we start? The Kobal have offered their cultural center as a neutral ground for talks. Dr. Stone is already there, working with Kobal scientists to stabilize the artifact. Your first task is to establish a framework for negotiations and bring all willing parties to the table. Over the next few hours, Mark found himself at the center of a diplomatic whirlwind. The cultural center, its elegant architecture, a stark contrast to the chaos outside, became a hub of frantic activity. Representatives from Earth, the Kobal government, and various Vorax factions filed in, their faces a mix of hope, skepticism, and barely concealed hostility. Mark worked tirelessly, drafting proposals and mediating heated debates. He leaned heavily on Zara and Lyra's knowledge of Kobali customs, using their insights to bridge cultural gaps and smooth over misunderstandings. As the sun set on the first day of negotiations, a new figure entered the fray. Dr. Victor Reeves, Earth's foremost expert on genetic engineering, strode into the chamber, his keen eyes taking in the assembled alien delegates. "Dr. Reeves," Mark greeted him, relief evident in his voice. "Your expertise couldn't have come at a better time." Reeves nodded, his gaze fixed on a group of Vorax. "Fascinating. The genetic reversion process is already visible to the naked eye. We need to study this phenomenon immediately." The addition of Reeves to the talks added a new layer of complexity. The scientific implications of reversing Vorax modifications became a central point of debate, with ethical concerns clashing against the Vorax's desire to reclaim their human heritage. As Mark navigated these treacherous diplomatic waters, he couldn't ignore the growing tension between Zara and Lyra. Their rivalry for his attention, once a minor distraction, now threatened to disrupt the delicate balance he was trying to maintain. "Human Mark," Zara approached him during a brief recess, her voice low and intense. "We must discuss the Kobali bonding ritual. It is time for you to choose." Before Mark could respond, Lyra appeared at his other side. "Do not let her pressure you, Mark. The choice must be yours alone." Mark felt a headache building behind his eyes. "Ladies, I appreciate your interest, but we're in the middle of crucial negotiations. Can this wait?" Their disappointed expressions made it clear that this issue wouldn't simply go away. Mark made a mental note to seek Admiral Chen's advice on handling this delicate situation without offending Kobali's sensibilities. As the second day of talks began, a new complication arose. A group of dissenting Vorax, led by a charismatic figure named Krell, requested a private audience with Mark. In a secluded corner of the cultural center, Krell laid out his proposal. "We can bring the loyalists to the table," he said, his partially reverted features giving him an unsettling appearance. "But in exchange, we demand priority in the genetic restoration process." Mark studied Krell's face, searching for any sign of deception. "I'll need to consult with the other parties. This decision can't be made unilaterally." As Mark weighed the implications of Krell's offer, Dr. Stone burst into the room, her face pale. "Mark, we have a problem. The artifact is emitting energy pulses at an increasing rate. It's causing widespread disruptions to Kobali technology." Mark's mind raced, connecting the dots. The artifact, the Vorax modifications, the ancient human origins. There's a pattern here we're not seeing. He turned to Krell. "We need your help. If we can understand the connection between the artifact and Vorax genetics, we might be able to stabilize both." Krell's eyes narrowed, but he nodded slowly. "Very well, human Mark. We will assist in your research." As Mark coordinated this new line of investigation, bringing together Dr. Reeves, Dr. Stone, and the Kobali scientists, his communicator buzzed with an urgent message from Earth Command. The voice on the other end was grim. "Kennedy, we have a new threat incoming. A human supremacist group has learned of the artifact and the Vorax situation. They're on their way to the Kobali system, intent on destroying both. You need to wrap up those negotiations fast and prepare for a potential attack." Mark's heart sank as he realized the true scale of the challenge before him. Peace between humans, Kobali, and Vorax now seemed like the least of his worries. With the artifact destabilizing, radical humans inbound, and his own personal entanglements threatening to undermine everything, he knew that the next few hours would determine the fate of not just this mission, but potentially the entire galaxy. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. The weight of multiple species' futures rested on his shoulders, and failure was not an option. As he prepared to reconvene the negotiations and brief the assembled delegates on the new threats, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that the true test of his abilities was only just beginning. As he prepared to reconvene the negotiations and brief the assembled delegates on the new threats, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that the true test of his abilities was only just starting. Mark strode purposefully into the command center, his face set with purpose. Admiral Chen, Dr. Reeves, and the Kobali leadership were already gathered around a holographic display of the system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new situation," Mark announced, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "A human extremist group is en route to the Kobali system. Their goal, destroy the artifact and eliminate the Vorax." A ripple of alarm spread through the room. Admiral Chen's eyes narrowed. "How much time do we have?" "Not enough," Mark replied, his mind racing. "But I have a plan." He turned to the holographic display, manipulating the controls to show a schematic of the planet. "We can use the artifact's energy signature to create a planetary shield. It's our best chance to protect ourselves and buy time for negotiations." Dr. Reeves leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Fascinating, but how do you propose we harness the artifact's energy on such a scale?" Mark gestured to the Kobali scientists. "By combining our shield technology with Kobali energy manipulation techniques. It's never been done before, but I believe it's our only option." The Kobali First Minister nodded slowly. "It is unconventional, but these are unconventional times. We will provide whatever assistance we can." As Dr. Reeves and the Kobali scientists huddled together, already discussing the technical aspects of the shield, Mark turned his attention back to the negotiations. He knew that uniting the various factions was crucial to their survival. Mark made his way to the secluded corner where Krell waited. The Vorax's partially reverted features, a stark reminder of the changes sweeping through their society. "Krell, I need your help," Mark said without preamble. "You said you could bring the Loyalists to the table. Now's the time." Krell's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "Very well, human Mark. I will speak with them. But remember your promise, priority in the restoration process." As Krell departed to contact the Loyalist Vorax, Mark felt a presence behind him. He turned to find Zara and Lyra, their luminescent eyes filled with a mixture of concern and grit. "Human Mark," Zara began, her voice low. "We understand the gravity of the situation, but we cannot ignore the matter of the bonding ritual indefinitely." Mark suppressed a sigh, knowing he needed to address this issue to maintain Kobali support. "I have a proposal," he said, choosing his words carefully. "A cultural exchange program. It would allow me to participate in a modified version of the ritual without fully committing to Kobali reproductive practices. Would this be acceptable?" Zara and Lyra exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Lyra spoke. "It is unconventional, but it honors the spirit of our ways while respecting your position. We accept." With that delicate matter settled, Mark returned to the main chamber where Dr. Reeves was examining the artifact with newfound excitement. "Kennedy, you need to see this," the scientist called out. "The artifact contains genetic information from an ancient human civilization, one that predates our entire recorded history." Mark's eyes widened as he processed the implications. "This changes everything," he murmured. "It's not just a weapon or a power source. It's a link to our shared past." As word of this discovery spread, Mark observed a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the negotiations. The revelation of a common ancestral link between humans, Kobali, and Vorax seemed to soften some of the hardened positions. In the medical bay, Dr. Reeves supervised the first attempt to reverse the genetic modifications of a willing Vorax volunteer. The process was tense, filled with moments of uncertainty, but as the volunteer's features slowly reverted to their original human form, a wave of excitement swept through the observers. Mark used this momentum to push for greater cooperation between the factions. He coordinated with Admiral Chen to integrate the human reinforcements with Kobali defenses and the cooperative Vorax ships. The result was a united defensive front, a physical representation of the alliance they were forging. As the planetary shield neared completion, long-range sensors blared a warning. The extremist fleet had entered the system. Mark watched grimly as the enemy ships appeared on the tactical display, their weapons already charging. A transmission cut through the tense silence. The face of Colonel Jeremiah Stark, leader of the extremist group, filled the main screen. His eyes blazed with fanatical intensity as he spoke. "This is Colonel Stark of the Human Purity Front. Surrender the artifact and all Vorax individuals immediately, or face total annihilation." Mark stepped forward, his voice steady. "Colonel Stark, I'm Mark Kennedy, representing a coalition of humans, Kobal and Vorax. We invite you to join us in peaceful negotiations. Negotiations? Stark spat the word as if it were poison. There can be no negotiation with abominations. The Vorax are an affront to human purity and must be eradicated. As Stark's transmission cut off, alarms blared throughout the complex. The extremists had launched their first salvo against the planetary shield. Mark held his breath as energy weapons impacted the barrier, but to his relief, the shield held. In the midst of the chaos, an unexpected figure approached Mark. It was Commander Grax, leader of the Loyalist Vorax faction. "Human Mark," Grax said, his voice gravelly. "It seems we face a common enemy. My forces offer a temporary alliance to repel these fanatics." Mark studied Grax's face, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, he nodded. "Agreed. Let's show them what we can accomplish when we work together." As the battle raged above, Mark noticed Dr. Stone frantically examining readings from the artifact. "Mark, we have a problem," she called out. "The strain on the artifact is increasing exponentially. If this continues, we risk a catastrophic overload." Mark's mind raced, piecing together a daring plan. What if we use the artifact's energy offensively, not to destroy the extremist ships, but to disable them? Dr. Stone's eyes widened as she grasped the concept. "It's possible, but it would require precise coordination between all our forces." "Then that's exactly what we'll do," Mark declared, turning to address the assembled leaders of the human, Kobal, and Vorax forces. "Here's the plan." As Mark outlined his strategy, he could see the mix of skepticism and hope on the faces around him. It was a long shot, but it was their best chance to end this conflict quickly and prove that their newfound alliance was more than just words. The combined fleet moved into position, executing Mark's plan with a level of coordination that would have seemed impossible just days ago. As the artifact's energy built to a crescendo, Mark gave the order. "Now!" A pulse of energy erupted from the planet, washing over the extremist fleet. Ship after ship went dark, their systems overloaded by the carefully calibrated energy wave. On the tactical display, Mark watched as the majority of the attacking force was neutralized without a single life lost. But one ship remained operational, Colonel Stark's command vessel. It had somehow resisted the energy pulse and was now on a direct course for the planet's surface. Mark knew that to truly end this conflict and secure the future of human-alien relations, he would have to confront Stark directly. He turned to the mixed group of human, Kobal, and Vorax soldiers standing ready nearby. "Prepare a fast interceptor," he ordered. "We're going to board that ship and end this once and for all." As Mark and his team boarded the sleek vessel, he couldn't help but feel the weight of history on his shoulders. The outcome of this final confrontation would shape the future of multiple species for generations to come. With a deep breath, he gave the order to launch, the interceptor streaking towards Stark's command ship and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Ahead, the interceptor sliced through space, its engines straining as Mark and his team raced towards Stark's command vessel. Through the view screen, Mark could see the looming shape of the enemy ship growing larger by the second. "Brace for impact!" Mark shouted as the first volley of weapons fire erupted from Stark's vessel. The interceptor shuddered violently, alarms blaring as energy beams lanced past them. Mark turned to the Vorax pilot, Grax. "Use your enhanced reflexes. Get us through this barrage." Grax nodded, his hands moving with inhuman speed across the controls. The interceptor banked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the onslaught of weapons fire. Mark watched in awe as Grax's modifications allowed him to anticipate and evade each attack with uncanny precision. "Approaching the hull," reported Zara, her luminescent eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Prepare for breach." Mark nodded to the human engineer, who readied the cutting equipment. "On my mark," he said, watching as they closed the final distance to Stark's ship. "Now!" The engineer activated the cutter, its energy beams slicing through the enemy hull. Simultaneously, Lyra channeled Kobal energy manipulation techniques, creating a localized field that prevented atmospheric loss. As the hull gave way, Mark led the charge into Stark's ship. The corridors were a maze of flashing red lights and blaring alarms. They encountered resistance almost immediately, Stark's fanatics opening fire from entrenched positions. "Take cover!" Mark yelled, diving behind a bulkhead. He watched as Grax used his enhanced strength to tear a door from its frame, using it as a makeshift shield for the team. The firefight was intense, with energy weapons scorching the walls around them. Mark coordinated their advance, utilizing each team member's unique abilities. The Vorax provided raw strength and speed, while the Kobali used their energy manipulation to disrupt enemy weapons and shields. As they fought their way towards the bridge, Mark's communicator crackled to life. Dr. Reeves's voice came through, tinged with urgency. "Mark, we have a situation here. The artifact is becoming increasingly unstable. We're doing everything we can to contain it, but I'm not sure how long we can hold it." "Understood, Doctor," Mark replied, ducking as a stray blast nearly took his head off. "We're moving as fast as we can. Any insights on the artifact's behavior?" "It's fascinating, actually," Dr. Reeves said, his scientific curiosity evident even in the midst of crisis. "The artifact seems to respond to specific genetic markers present in both humans and Vorax. It's as if it was designed as a tool for genetic preservation and manipulation." This information raced through Mark's mind as they continued their advance. Could this be the key to understanding the artifact's true purpose? And more importantly, could it help them stabilize it? After what felt like hours of intense combat, they finally reached the bridge. The doors were sealed, but with a combination of human ingenuity, Vorax strength, and Kobali energy manipulation, they managed to force them open. They burst onto the bridge to find Colonel Stark waiting for them, surrounded by his most loyal followers. The man's eyes blazed with fanatical intensity as he regarded Mark and his diverse team. "So, the great negotiator arrives," Stark sneered. "Come to see the dawn of a new era for humanity?" "Stand down, Stark," Mark said, his voice firm. "It's over. Your fleet has been neutralized." Stark laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "You think this is about a simple military victory? No, Kennedy. This is about the future of our species." He gestured to a display showing the artifact. "That relic and the abominations you call the Vorax, they're the key to human ascension. With them, we can create a genetically superior human race, free from the taint of alien influence." Mark saw shock register on the faces of even Stark's most devoted followers. He seized on this moment of doubt. "Listen to yourselves," he urged them. "Is this really what you signed up for? Genetic manipulation? Playing God with our own species?" As uncertainty spread among Stark's crew, Mark nodded to his Kobali team members. They began to subtly manipulate the energy systems on the bridge, causing consoles to flicker and alarms to sound erratically. Stark, noticing the dissent among his ranks, grew more agitated. "Enough!" he roared. "I will not be denied my destiny." He lunged for a specific console, his intentions clear. "Stop him!" Mark shouted. "He's trying to activate the self-destruct." The Vorax members of Mark's team sprang into action, their enhanced strength and speed allowing them to engage Stark's personal guards before they could react. Meanwhile, Mark himself raced towards Stark, tackling the man just as his fingers brushed the console. They grappled on the floor, Stark's face contorted with rage. "You fool," he spat. "You're destroying humanity's one chance at greatness." Mark managed to pin Stark down, looking the man directly in the eyes. "No, Colonel, I'm saving it. Our greatness comes from our diversity, our ability to work together despite our differences. That's what makes us human." With Stark subdued and his remaining followers surrendering, Mark allowed himself a moment of relief, but it was short-lived as his communicator buzzed urgently. Admiral Chen's voice came through, tight with tension. "Kennedy, we have a critical situation. The artifact's instability has reached critical levels. It's threatening to destroy not just the Kobali homeworld, but potentially the entire star system." Mark's mind raced, processing this new threat even as he secured Stark. He thought about Dr. Reeves's earlier words about the artifact's response to human and Vorax genetic markers. A plan began to form in his mind, audacious and potentially suicidal, but possibly their only hope. "Admiral," he said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation, "I'm taking my team directly to the artifact. I have an idea that might stabilize it, but we'll need to move fast." As they raced back to their ship, Mark briefed his team on the plan. They would fly directly to the artifact's location, hoping that the combined presence of human and Vorax genetic markers might allow them to interface with and stabilize the ancient device. Just as they prepared to launch, another ship appeared on their sensors, moving to intercept them. Mark's heart sank as he recognized the energy signature. It was Zara and Lyra's vessel. "Mark!" Zara's voice came through the comm. "We're coming with you. You can't face this alone." As their ships entered the planet's atmosphere, the situation below became clear. The city was in chaos. Energy pulses from the artifact, causing widespread system failures. Buildings shook, vehicles crashed, and people ran panicked through the streets. Mark gritted his teeth, knowing that every second counted. "Zara, Lyra, I appreciate your concern, but this mission is already dangerous enough. Return to safety immediately." "Not a chance, human Mark," Lyra replied, her voice filled with dedication. "We started this journey together, and we'll see it through together." As they navigated through the chaos towards the artifact chamber, Mark realized that this unexpected development forced him to confront feelings he'd been avoiding. The presence of Zara and Lyra added a personal dimension to an already high-stakes situation. Their ships landed in a plaza near the artifact chamber, the ground trembling beneath their feet as they disembarked. Energy discharges lit up the sky, and the air crackled with palpable tension. Mark gathered his team, including the newly arrived Zara and Lyra. "Listen up," he said, raising his voice above the din of the panicking city. "What we're about to do has never been attempted before. It's dangerous, and I can't guarantee any of our safety. But if we succeed, we save not just this planet, but potentially forge a new understanding between our species." He looked at each member of his diverse team, human, Kobali, and Vorax, seeing purpose reflected in their eyes. "Let's move out," he ordered, leading the way towards the artifact chamber. As they approached the massive doors of the chamber, a violent energy pulse knocked them off their feet. The artifact's power was growing more unstable by the second. Mark knew that whatever happened next would shape the future of galactic politics for generations to come. With a nod to his team, Mark placed his hand on the chamber door, ready to face whatever lay beyond. The fate of multiple civilizations hung in the balance as they prepared to confront the full power of the ancient artifact. Artifact. The massive doors groaned open, revealing a chamber bathed in pulsating blue light. Mark and his team stumbled inside, nearly knocked off their feet by another violent energy surge. "By the stars!" Zara gasped, her luminescent eyes wide with awe and fear. The artifact dominated the center of the chamber, a towering obelisk of otherworldly metal that crackled with arcs of unstable energy. Consoles around the room sparked and fizzled, their displays flickering erratically. Mark's communicator crackled to life, Dr. Reeves's voice barely audible through the static. "Mark, artifact, critical levels, minutes left." "Copy that, Doctor," Mark shouted over the deafening hum of energy. "We're working on it." He turned to his team, mind racing. The earlier information about genetic markers clicked into place, forming a desperate plan. "Listen up," Mark called out. "We need to physically interface with the artifact. A human, a Vorax, and a Kobali. Our combined genetic diversity might stabilize it." Zara stepped forward, her face set with drive. "I'll do it." "No," Mark said firmly. "I need to be part of this. The diplomatic implications are exactly why you shouldn't risk yourself," Lyra interjected. Mark shook his head. "This isn't up for debate. Krell," he nodded to a Vorax soldier, "you're with me. We need a Kobali volunteer." A slender Kobali scientist raised her hand. "I am Tala. I will represent my people." As the rest of the team worked to establish a makeshift containment field, Mark, Krell, and Tala approached the artifact. Its energy lashed out at them, raising the hair on Mark's arms. "On three," Mark said, locking eyes with his companions. "1, 2, 3. They placed their hands on the artifact's surface. Instantly, searing pain coursed through Mark's body. He gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to pull away. Beside him, Krell growled in agony, while Tala's normally pale skin glowed with an eerie light. Through the haze of pain, Mark became aware of a change. The artifact's wild energy fluctuations began to slow, its pulsations growing more rhythmic. Suddenly, a commotion erupted behind them. Mark turned his head, careful to maintain contact with the artifact. His eyes widened as he saw Colonel Stark, somehow free of his restraints, charging towards them with murderous intent. "No!" Stark roared. "I won't let you destroy humanity's future!" Before Mark could react, Zara and Lyra moved in unison. The Kobali and Vorax rivals, setting aside their differences, intercepted Stark. Zara used her energy manipulation abilities to disrupt Stark's movements, while Lyra's enhanced strength allowed her to grapple with the crazed colonel. Together, they subdued Stark, forcing him to the ground. The seamless cooperation between the two spoke volumes about the potential for their species to work together. Mark returned his focus to the artifact, the pain intensifying. Just as he felt he couldn't endure anymore, the obelisk's surface shimmered. Streams of holographic data burst forth, filling the air with glowing symbols and images. "Incredible," Tala whispered, her scientific curiosity evident despite the strain. The holograms coalesced into scenes from Earth's distant past. Mark watched in awe as the history of the precursor human civilization unfolded before his eyes. He saw great cities rising and falling, advanced technologies beyond his comprehension, and finally, a looming cosmic threat that drove the ancients to create the artifact. "It's a failsafe," Mark realized aloud. "They created it to preserve human genetic diversity." As the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Mark felt his strength ebbing. His vision blurred and his knees threatened to buckle. Beside him, Krell swayed dangerously, while Tala's glow had dimmed to a faint flicker. "Hold on," Mark urged them, his voice weak. "We're almost there." With a final surge of effort, they poured their remaining energy into the artifact. The obelisk's pulsations slowed further, then settled into a steady, gentle rhythm. The oppressive hum in the chamber faded to a low, almost musical tone. Mark stumbled backward, collapsing to the floor. As his consciousness faded, he saw Zara and Lyra rushing towards him, their faces etched with concern. He awoke sometime later in a makeshift medical bay. Admiral Chen stood at the foot of his bed, her expression a mix of relief and admiration. "You did it, Kennedy," she said. "The artifact is stable, and you've opened up a whole new chapter in our understanding of human history." Mark sat up slowly, wincing at the lingering ache in his body. "The others?" he asked. "All recovering," Chen assured him. "Your actions saved not just this planet, but potentially the entire star system." As Mark processed this information, he became aware of a strange sensation, a connection, faint but unmistakable, linking him to Krell and Tala. Somehow, their shared experience with the artifact had forged a bond between them. "Sir," Mark said, meeting the Admiral's gaze, "I think we need to completely rethink our approach to these negotiations." Chen nodded, a hint of a smile on her face. "I agree. That's why I'm granting you expanded authority to continue the talks. Traditional diplomacy isn't going to cut it here." As Chen left, Mark's thoughts turned to the challenges ahead. He had to balance the interests of Earth, the Kobali, the divided Vorax factions, and now the revelations about humanity's ancient past. The stakes had never been higher. His contemplation was interrupted as Zara and Lyra entered the room. The sight of them sent a confusing mix of emotions through him. Their actions during the crisis had only deepened his feelings for both of them, complicating an already complex situation. "How are you feeling?" Zara asked, her luminescent eyes filled with concern. "Like I touched a star and lived to tell about it," Mark replied with a weak smile. Lyra stepped forward, her usually stoic expression softened. "Your actions were impressive, human Mark. You have given us much to consider." As Mark looked at the two of them, he realized that his personal and political challenges had become inextricably intertwined. The path ahead would require all of his diplomatic skill, compassion, and newfound connection to navigate. With a deep breath, Mark swung his legs over the side of the bed. We have work to do, he said, standing up. It's time to forge a new future for all our peoples. The artifact's revelations and the shared experience of averting disaster had changed everything. As Mark prepared to resume negotiations, he knew that the decisions made in the coming days would shape the course of galactic politics for generations to come. Mark Kennedy stood at the center of the Grand Assembly Hall, his body still aching from the ordeal with the artifact. The cavernous room buzzed with activity as delegates from Earth, the Kobal government, and both Vorax factions took their seats. The air crackled with tension and possibility. Adjusting his formal attire, Mark took a deep breath. He felt the faint connection to Krell and Tala, a reminder of their shared experience. As he stepped up to the podium, the room fell silent. Representatives, honored guests, Mark began, his voice clear and steady. We stand at a crossroads of history. The events of the past days have shown us the power of cooperation and the dangers of division. Today, we have an opportunity to forge a new path forward. He launched into his comprehensive peace proposal, laying out each point with precision. As he spoke about the gradual reversal of Vorax genetic modifications, he noticed several Vorax delegates leaning forward, their interest piqued. Access to the artifact's knowledge will be shared, Mark continued. We propose the establishment of a joint research facility where scientists from all our peoples can work together to unlock the secrets of our shared past and build a brighter future. The Kobal science minister, her bioluminescent skin glowing with excitement, nodded approvingly. Mark could see the wheels turning in her mind, already planning potential research projects. As the day progressed, Mark found himself constantly on his feet, moving between different factions, addressing concerns, and building consensus. He drew on his unique bond with Krell and Tala, using their insights to navigate the complex web of interspecies politics. During a recess, Mark stepped out onto a balcony for a moment of quiet. The Kobal capital stretched out before him, its organic architecture glowing in the late afternoon light. He heard soft footsteps behind him and turned to see Zara and Lyra approaching. Your words are having an impact, Zara said, her luminescent eyes shining with admiration. I've never seen the factions so willing to listen to each other. Lyra nodded, her usually stoic expression softened. Your leadership in this crisis has been impressive, Human Mark. You've given us all much to consider. Mark felt a flutter in his chest as he looked at them both. The tension between them had shifted, evolving into something new and unexpected. An idea began to form in his mind, audacious and potentially revolutionary. Thank you both, he said, his voice low. Your support has meant more than I can express. I have a proposal for you, but it's unorthodox. It might shock some people, but I believe it could be a powerful symbol of what we're trying to achieve here. As Mark outlined his idea for a three-way partnership, he watched their expressions change from surprise to thoughtful consideration. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. It is unconventional, Zara said slowly, but then so is everything about this situation. I'm willing if you both are. Lyra's eyes darted between Mark and Zara. This would be a significant cultural shift for my people, but perhaps that is exactly what is needed. I agree. Their decision made, Mark felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He led them back into the assembly hall, ready to shock the delegates with this unprecedented proposal. As the final session of negotiations began, Mark stood once more at the podium. He outlined the key points of the agreement, watching as nods of approval spread through the room. Then, taking a deep breath, he broached the subject of his personal arrangement with Zara and Lyra. A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembly. Mark saw confusion, shock, and in some cases outrage on the faces before him. But as he explained the symbolism of their union, a representation of true interspecies cooperation, the mood began to shift. The Kobal Prime Minister stood, her face thoughtful. This is indeed unprecedented, she said, but perhaps that is exactly what this moment calls for. You have my support, Ambassador Kennedy. One by one, other delegates voiced their approval. The Vorax faction leader, his scaled skin shimmering, spoke last. If we are to forge a new path, we must be willing to embrace new ideas. This union has my blessing. As the assembly adjourned for the day, Mark received word that Colonel Stark had requested an audience. Intrigued and wary, Mark made his way to the secure facility where Stark was being held. The once proud colonel sat slumped in his chair, his eyes haunted. As Mark entered, Stark looked up, a flicker of his old defiance crossing his face before fading away. "Kennedy," Stark said, his voice rough. I've been watching the broadcasts of the negotiations. What you're doing, it's not what I expected." Mark sat across from him, studying the man who had once been his enemy. "What did you expect, Colonel?" Stark shook his head. "Dominance, subjugation. But this cooperation. I saw what happened with the artifact, the power when your team worked together. It's made me question everything." As their conversation continued, Mark saw an opportunity. He spoke of rehabilitation, of second chances. Stark listened, skepticism gradually giving way to cautious hope. The next day, as the final round of negotiations began, Mark advocated for a fair trial for Stark and his followers, with the possibility of rehabilitation. The proposal was met with resistance at first, but Mark's impassioned argument about the power of redemption eventually swayed the assembly. As the Kobali Accords took shape, Mark felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he'd experienced before. The treaty was comprehensive, covering everything from cultural exchange programs to joint scientific ventures. At its heart was a shared governance structure for the artifact and its knowledge, ensuring that no single species could monopolize its power. The signing ceremony was a spectacle that would be remembered for generations. Mark, representing humanity, joined hands with Krell and Tala. As they raised their joined hands, a cheer erupted from the assembled dignitaries and the crowds watching on view screens across the galaxy. Admiral Chen approached Mark as the ceremony concluded, a rare smile on her face. "Exceptional work, Kennedy," she said. "I'm recommending you for a position overseeing the implementation of these accords. The galaxy needs people like you to guide us through this transition." As the celebration began in earnest, Mark found a quiet moment with Zara and Lyra. They stood on a balcony overlooking the Kobali capital, watching as ships from Earth, Vorax worlds, and other alien races arrived for the festivities. "So," Zara said, her hand finding Mark's, "what happens now?" Mark looked at them both, feeling a surge of affection. "Now, we build something new. Together." Lyra nodded, her eyes on the horizon. "It will not be easy. There will be challenges." "True," Mark agreed, "but I think we're up for it." As the twin suns of the Kobali system began to set, casting a warm glow over the city, Mark Kennedy stood between the two women who had become so important to him. He thought about the journey that had brought him here and the path that lay ahead. It would be complex, challenging, and at times frustrating. But as he watched the diverse crowd below, humans mingling with Kobali and Vorax, he knew it would also be endlessly fascinating. The galaxy was entering a new age, and Mark Kennedy was ready to help guide it forward, one step at a time.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.